This video is going to cover nested if-else statements. Previous videos we covered if statements, if-else statements, if-else statements, and now we're going to talk about if-else statements that also hold embedded if-else statements. Now, this is something you can do. There are better ways to accomplish this logic as you become a more competent software developer, but for now, this is a good way to do branching logic within other branches of logic. So let's talk about what I mean by that. Let's open up our example of a logic tree. Now, intentionally I made this logic tree pretty complex. It's not super complex, but it's complex enough to show all of the examples as we learn about handling logic in JavaScript. So in a previous video, we talked about using an if-else and then an if-else in order to do different logic sets or different branches of logic. Now, what happens when we have a branching logic that happens inside of a branch of logic that's already branched? So what do I mean by that? It sounds kind of confusing. So here, I've made a decision as to what thrill I'm looking for, and then now I'm trying to understand that thrill according to this logic chart. So I feel like doing, and the example used was gaming, and then we find gaming is a thrill, and then do I want to understand that thrill? Yes or no? So let's say that I really do want to think about why I like gaming so much or why I like a particular activity so much, and I really want to understand it. So when we're talking about this particular thrill, so gaming, do I want to understand it? I have a branch of logic. It's either yes, I want to understand it, or it's no, I don't. And if yes, then I want to say, why am I looking for this thrill or connection, which runs into another split of logic using a switch statement over here, most likely. And then down here, if the answer is no, then I go ahead and decide whether or not I feel responsible or care about the consequences of my actions in the long run, right? If the answer is no, then I go ahead and I game or I do whatever that activity is. And if the answer is yes, then I get my homework done or I do my chores before I do whatever activity that is, right? So right here in this logic train or this logic tree, we've got what could be implemented as a nested if-else. So our first question is, do I want to understand the thrill seeking? Which goes to a no or a yes. So that's an if or an else statement. And so this is the if part, and this is the else part. Now, if we follow the else part, then another question gets asked. Do I feel responsible? And then I get an answer. Yes, that's my if. And then else, which is the no, right? Because of the Boolean logic, the true or false that happens in an if-else statement. If we take this right here, we see that within the no portion of the code of an if-else statement, so in the else portion, we're going to have a whole nother if-else happening right here. So let's go ahead and code that out so we can see what happens. Again, I'm going to go ahead and create a new folder. Again, it's going to be under Tim, Dev, and then the Git repository where I'm storing all this demo code because I want to make sure I keep it safe. And right here, we're going to call it 06, and then we're going to call this nested if else. Nested if else. And let's go ahead and put statements on there since I've been adding that to everything. All right, click open. That makes that my working directory or my project folder. Let's go ahead and add another, or our first JavaScript file. So nested if else.js. Should open it up inside of our editor. Again, this is Visual Studio Code. And since we're just going to be executing this in the console to see output, we're not going to worry about an HTML file and we're not going to worry about a CSS file because we are just going to use the debug in order to execute this code against Node.js and just see the output in the console. So let's go through this really quick. right here, do I want to understand my thrill seeking? So let's go ahead and set up our project really quick. So we've got stuff happens to determine thrill seeking is our objective. All right. So we've got a bunch of stuff that happens in code, maybe comes in from a web service, a web form, user. Somehow we get that information. So let thrill equal gaming. And then, because of the way our logic goes, do I want to understand my thrill seeking? So now we're getting into the psychology of the whole thing. So now maybe we ask the user the question, right? Ask user question, and it is, do you want to understand your thrill seeking? And then we get some kind of output from the user, from a web form, something like that. Let's say understanding equal true. So the user says, yes, I want to understand it at this point in time. Oh, wait, we wanted to branch down here. So let's say false. They told us false. They don't want to know. All right, so we're going to implement this branch of logic right here, this one right here, using an if-else. So if understanding, we want to do something. So if understanding, so here's the yes, so that's the if block right here, the block of code that follows the if, because if this equates to true, we want to execute the code in here, right? So if yes, we want to execute code right here. All right, so if we follow the branch, yes, then why am I looking for a thrill or connection? So let's dig into the reasons, okay? And then based on our logic tree, if it's no, which is the else, because this equated to no, so if no, then what are we going to do? Well, we're going to ask another question. We're going to ask, do we feel responsible today? In other words, do we care that there's other stuff we need to get done, or do we just want to go make that thrill happen, right? So if no, then we ask another question. Ask user, do you feel responsible today, right? So that's the next question. Now, because this ends up being a question, the reality is that we end up with another complete if-else statement that needs to happen in here in order to handle this question and then the branching logic that comes as a result of that question, right? So let's jump to the question. So do you feel responsible today? So we'll need to ask the user that question somehow. So maybe it's a web form, something like that. And so as a result of that web form, we're going to have this feeling responsible. And let's say, based on this logic, it's either a yes or a no. So we have our if block. So if it equates to true, we have our else block if it equates to no. So let's just say we do not. Today we are stressed out to the max and we just need to decompress. So finals are coming up, and so we decide we're going to play for just an hour in order to decompress. So right now, at this moment, we're not feeling too responsible. So we got to ask that question, right? We got to do that logical check. So if feeling responsible, then right here, we're going to implement this logic right here. So if yes, then we're going to, according to this logic, we're going to ask the user another question. So is my homework done and are my chores done? So ask user, is homework done and chores complete? Right? And then our else logic, which is the no, we're going to go ahead and, so if no, we're going to do the thrill, right? So we're going to go ahead and do X. So we're going to go ahead and play a game. So then we go ahead and we say, we want some output so that we know what's happening. Log gaming for decompression purposes. There we go. All right. Okay, so let's implement the rest of this logic really quick. So if I want to understand things, then there's another question. Why am I looking for a thrill or a connection? So why am I looking for a thrill or a connection? Let's see right here. So dig into the reason. So if we were to implement this, we would have a whole nother, from this, it looks like it could be an if-else statement, or it could end up being a switch statement right here. So let's go ahead and let's just output some info since we don't want to get super deep into this logic tree, and let's just say digging into the reasons why. All right. And then if it was a no, we went down this logic train right here. So let's go ahead and we get the information, feeling responsible. All right, so right here we've got a whole nother question, right? Is my homework and my chores done? So let's just go ahead and put some output just so we can see that we got to this based on our Boolean expressions. So checking my homework and chores are complete. All right, so let's run the logic really quick. Right here we got a thrill is gaming. We're not really checking that right now. We're just saying that that's what we're looking to do. There's probably a bunch of other logic we could run against that based on this tree. But right now what we're really interested in is, the first question was, do I want to understand why I'm thrill seeking? Well, the answer is false. So based on the fact that it is currently false, we are expecting that this code does not get executed. And we do expect that this code gets executed. So really quick, if we wanted to put a breakpoint right here, and then we want to run it with the debugger, we can go ahead and have it start running. Move that up a little bit. And right here, we can actually check to see that understanding, if we look right here in our variables, this is the current value of understanding, which is what we expected, because right here we assign the value false to the variable understanding. So when the if statement checks this expression, because understanding is actually the value false, this code is not going to get run. So if we step over it, we should expect it to come down into this else statement. So let's go ahead and step over, and you see it went right into our else statement, and we stopped at the first line since we're stepping line by line. So if we look, feeling responsible right now is undefined, right here, the value, because it hasn't been set yet. As soon as we step over it, we'll now see that false was set to the value of feel responsible now has the value false, so it is false. So we hit our nested if. The reason why it's called nested is because this if statement right here lives inside of one of the blocks of an outer if statement, so the outer if statement. But it only gets executed or checked if we end up inside of the else portion of the containing if else. I hope that is making sense. If not, make sure you ask your teacher or one of the tutors to go into this example in depth. So we ask the user if they feel responsible today, because we've already decided that they really didn't want to dig into the reasons. Now we're asking them, okay, so you don't want to understand why you're thrill seeking or why you want to play a game. You just want to play a game. So now we're asking you, do you feel responsible? In other words, at this moment, do you care about other things? Right now the answer is false. So being that it's false, we believe that this block right here will not run, because it only runs if yes. So because this is false, meaning no, we should expect that this else is going to run. And so if we step down, we'll see it lands right on console.log. And then we can go ahead and just finish letting it play. And we'll see that we are gaming for decompression purposes. So that right there is a nested if-else. If we change this to true, we should only get the digging into reasons why. So let's go ahead and try that. Save it, and then let's debug again. Oh, let's turn off our breakpoints really quick, just so we can see how they're put. So digging into reasons why, so we got that. So let's set this back to false so that we can go back into our nested if-else and branching code. And let's change this to true. In other words, we are filling responsible. So with that, we should expect this code to run, not this code. So let's go ahead and run that with our debug, which is just F5 on a Mac. Checking my homework and chores are complete. So there we go. We have a nested if-else inside of another if-else. This is the containing if-else right here, and this is the nested if-else. And of course, you can have a nested if-else up in here as well, which we saw from our logic tree. We could have an if-else right here handling this logic inside of the yes, but we just chose to do a console output really quick. All right, hopefully that helps. Again, if you have any questions, make sure you contact your instructor or a tutor. Now, as always, from these videos, we're gonna make sure we keep our code safe as always. So let's go ahead and open up a terminal. And once you have a terminal open, you should be at the root of your user account. And if we do an ls on Mac or a dir on Windows, you should have a list of all of your files and folders. Again, I'm storing everything in a folder that I created called dev. So you're going to do cd dev. And then I am currently saving everything into a repo that I call Neumont Studios. So I'm going to cd to Neumont Studios. I'm going to do a git status. That's going to tell me what files and folders have not been added to my repo. As you can see, the current one where we're doing nested if-else statements hasn't been added. So I'm going to do git add. And then I can do a git status. And it should show that this is now added. In other words, it is staged to be added to my repository, but has not yet been committed. So git commit -m to add a message. And let's say we've got screencast 6 nested if-else statements. Go ahead and hit enter. If I do a git status again, we should see everything's good, except for I have not pushed it from my local up to my remote repository. So if my computer crashed right now, I would still lose all of those commits. So we're going to do a git push and enter my passphrase. Pushes up to my repository. If I do a git status, I should see that I am now up to date with my remote master origin. And we are done.